just did something weird. Okay, we're back.
We're back.
I hope we are back officially. Possibly.
In some sort of capacity.
We had a little mic problem, but welcome everybody to our new Evolved PinTech Live. How is everybody doing? Welcome back. Take 2, take
Version
3, take 4, as many
2.5.
takes as it gets, just so we can do our awesome PinTech episode today. So, Kyle, why don't you now go ahead and show us a little bit about our upgrades and studio upgrades? Where are we now?
We are.
The place looks cool.
In our super rad new studio that has all of my games, well, some of my games, and all of our new equipment. And we set it up to look like a pinball show because we really miss going to pinball shows. So
yes,
yeah, should be kind of fun.
We got a thumbs up from Jeff Rensby. Thank you so much.
Cool, people can hear us now. Yeah, we were fighting microphone issues, and then like a freak super heavy rainstorm came through.
It was raining so hard, it was just like.
Yeah, it was a little crazy.
Oh my goodness. But we're back. So.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with us and coming back because we're going to do linear flippers, and linear flippers are my favorite.
Awesome. Well, since we're kind of running behind, let's just go ahead and get into it. As you guys can see, we are working on a Lady Luck, and it's not the roller games. Last time we left off, we did the roller games flipper swap, and now we're waiting for more parts to come in for that. So we decided, hey, let's switch the game and show you guys something different. So now we're going with this Bally-Midway. This is a System 6803 solid state game. And Kyle, explain what all needs to be done to this game.
It's really rough. I bought this game and it worked. So I just kind of like played it for a while, and it really, really, really needs a lot of attention. The flippers are super worn out, and it's got a really fun flipper, and I'm excited to show people how to mess with them a little bit because they're really awesome. This is a kind of an uncommon game. This is from the era when pinball was like super dead. I think they only made like 500 of these things. But it's a very simple game, you know, kind of throwback to the electromechanical era of just a flat playfield. Drop target's a spinner. What's better? Yeah, you should jump in. Let's lift this thing up, and we'll get inside the game.
Great.
We've got.
I'm really excited. So you were telling me earlier that so here's your flipper rebuild kit. That was what I was going to come up with. And even though this is a particular era of Bally and the system on the computer and stuff is different, the flipper rebuild part for all Bally games should be somewhat similar, right?
Yep, every game from Rolling Stones in about, I think that game came out in like early 1980 until Truck Stop, I think. Truck Stop was a weird game. Like, Williams had already bought Bally at that point. And I think Truck Stop used Williams flippers for the bottom flippers and these linear flippers for the upper assemblies, which was kind of funny. If you remember, or if you are familiar, let's see, we can zoom in now. This is pretty cool. Get like a good shot of what's going on here. You remember how like a traditional Williams flipper worked? It had a crank that would pull in, and you had 2 pivot points. You had one pivot point on the crank and another pivot point attached.
Do you think you could zoom out a little bit for us?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that got a little goofy.
We lost that other camera, of course. Oh, I need to move over some.
See.
Come on, camera operator. Let's get a nice, good shot of that.
There we go. Hold on. Let's see. We'll get it in nice and close. All right.
Okay, cool.
It'll give us a
So
little
this is
decent view
one
there.
of 3 flippers, right?
Yes.
On this game.
This game uses 3 flippers. Actually, let's get a handy cam again. I'm going to show you some things to look for to tell when a linear flipper is worn out. On a traditional crank-style flipper, you have basically 3 points of movement against the link and against the crank.
All right.
Bally designed this system where it's all in one motion. The solenoid energizes, pulls the plunger in, and in one motion it pulls that crank to actuate the flipper. Which, you know, the idea was that they would not require as many rebuilds or something like that. That didn't turn out to be totally true, but the biggest problem with these things is there's a nylon puck, and that is what takes up the slack and is what is contacted by the plunger to rotate the flipper. You can see this thing really beat up and loose, destroyed. There's a lot of free play here. There is one upside to these flippers, though. When this does happen, they still feel good. It's not ideal. You'll have a flipper that is fully actuated, and if the ball comes and touches the flipper, you see that? How you can still get a little bit of play out of that flipper while it's fully actuated?
Is that okay?
No. Well, yes, it's okay, but it does not, not good for gameplay, you know? You want your flippers to be solid. So, we're going to rebuild this flipper. This is the most complicated of all 3 of these flippers because it has the 3-position switch. You've got your end of stroke switch here, and this switch here actuates the upper flipper.
Oh, wow. I like how you can just zoom in on that. Now I can actually see where you were talking about where the metal is connecting for that EOS switch.
Yeah, no, this is so much better when we really figure out how to use this equipment. Look at that. You can really see what's going on. So, again, this thing's beat. You know, I'm missing a screw here on the flipper base plate. That end of stroke switch is held in with 1 screw. Everything's super loose. Let's get this thing worked up.
Cool.
All right.
Nice.
That thing in frame a little bit. All right, cool. Let's take a look. One thing that's really common on this game, or on these games, is these base plates here, they strip out. It's really, really common.
Okay.
And this one suffers from that problem. The coil stop screws are stripped and someone's put nuts behind it. So let's start taking these things apart. I'll show you what we've done and what we will do. I'm going to be using this plate that I have from my stash of parts to replace this one, and I'll tell you what I did to this plate and what you'd need to do if you have a stripped out plate.
Very cool.
What we need to do, first steps first, always, is let's remove the flipper bat. Actually, no. Let's turn the game off. Remember, always turn the game off.
Turn off the game when you work on it.
Always. We're going to get our 1/8 inch Allen wrench. This isn't ideal. I am using a T-handle wrench. I will probably get a regular Allen wrench to do this, but what happens is if I put this wrench in here, it will, see if I could get that in frame. I can't rotate it. It's against the playfield. This allows me to apply a lot of torque, but it's not ideal to remove screws in this sense. So I will grab my Allen wrench index here.
Okay.
Gives me the ability to use more torque. And these are, from the factory, these are 1/8 inch set screws.
All right.
We will.
Hello, Kevin Moore. Thanks for joining us. Oh, Zach Wallens on Facebook said he's glad he helped convince you to buy that Lady Luck.
Zach,
that's a pretty rare game too, right?
Yeah, and Zach is so cool that he has multiple of them. I love this game, and it is his fault. So thanks, Zach.
How many Lady Lucks can you have?
As many as you can find and your wallet allows, I suppose. To get to this other set screw, you will need to actuate the flipper, you've got one set screw here, and this one is facing up and down currently. So to reach that, I will pull the flipper in, and that'll switch the angle so I can access it. When you're working with recessed Allen heads like this, make sure your wrench is fully inserted into the set screw. If it's only kind of in there, you risk the chance of rounding it off, and you've created a lot of work for yourself. And it sucks because you have no one to blame but yourself.
Yeah, that's...
So I got it loose enough. Let's see.
So you're
These
not
are
pulling
sticky.
it all the way out, you're just loosening it?
Yeah, we're going to loosen them enough to where we can rotate the flipper bat and get it out of the clamp, right? These are in there holding the bat inside the collar. Go. See what we got. Yeah, still in there pretty tight. I've got one hand on the flipper bat right now. I'm going to loosen these until I lose all resistance, but not take them all the way out.
One hand up and over, actually holding onto the flipper.
Yep, I have one hand behind the playfield.
See that? Oh, it's hard to see, but I believe
this.
you.
Loose enough now, got enough torque to take it out. Okay, so we can yank the flipper bat out. It might take a little bit of strength. There it goes.
Oh, yeah, it popped out.
Here's a little bit of word of advice. With these flippers, if you ever do need to swap sides, if you ever need to adjust your flippers up or down to get that perfect feel so it doesn't hop when it's coming off the lane guide, when you put those set screws in, they do make these little pock marks. They find a hole, right? Okay. So if you did a micro adjustment on this flipper to rotate it up 1, 2, 3 degrees, and you retighten it down, those set screws are going to kind of force it back to its memory position. One thing you can do if you don't have another flipper bat, swap the left and the right sides.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
There's a pro tip.
Kevin Moore said sometimes the set screws will cause dimples or marring on the shaft.
Yep, exactly. That's what I was just mentioning.
Right.
It's, you can always swap them. Nowadays, flipper bats are cheap enough, and they make the game look so much better. At this point, I still have the expansion spring, the return spring hooked up. So this thing's kind of just sitting here. But what you can do is lift that crank arm out of its hole, or its routed out, cubby inside the plunger. And don't mangle your springs, and you can reuse them unless you have a flipper rebuild set, and then you get new ones. I'm going to use some needle nose pliers so I don't mangle them on camera.
Yeah, be nice to your flipper rebuild, your flipper mech over there.
One of those things.
It's hard to see from this angle, but what are you twisting out? Oh, you're pulling the spring out.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the open end of the spring out of the teeny hole. There we go.
All right.
I didn't even mangle it. It's still okay. My auto shop teacher when I was in high school always used to do exactly opposite of what he said. So he always had that good old man dad saying, "Do as I say, not as I do." So listen to what I say, don't replicate what I do. Okay, in this case now, we are going to get the, since the coil stop is still holding the coil and the plunger in place, but there are nuts holding the coil stop to the back of the flipper base, we're going to remove the flipper base from the playfield so we can access and get a nut on those, get a wrench on those nuts from the back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To do this, we need, there are 2 size screws on this guy. See if I could get this back in here. There's just flopped it. This is fun. We've got 1/4-inch head screws here and a 5/16 head screw in the center. I'll show you when I remove them. See if I could frame that better on the...
Yeah.
There you go.
Move this. I'm going to flop them around real quick.
Get our 1/4-inch nut driver and remove the 4 outermost screws on the flipper base plate.
I keep leaning in oh, this is so interesting. And then I forget that I'm on camera, my face just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's hard to sit back and watch, I feel like I'm right there. I need to be doing this soon on my game, and I'm excited that it's a Bally-Midway as well. So I'm taking lots of notes.
This will be exactly like your hard body is.
Yeah.
I'm going to remove the
that's what I
bottom
need.
screw first, so the top screw will hold it in place. There's memory. These things are really pressed into the wood, but I always like to leave the screw on top holding the device in, so it doesn't want to rotate or flop or anything like that. So I will remove the bottom one.
While you do that, MLZpinhead on Twitch said they have a bounce back effect when a fastball hits an extended flipper, and they videoed the flipper mech and see that the EOS is making a brief sparky contact, and that energizes the flipper. The problem is that the entire shaft and bushing has a tiny bit of play, so it's that, not the gap on the EOS. And have you ever seen that? And how do you remedy? And does that make sense?
Yeah, no, if you have any, the bushing's job is to hold the flipper shaft straight. If it's cracked at all, and the flipper can do any sort of teeny bits of bending, that's all, A, robbing power, and B, making an unideal situation for the flipper, right? I'm going to replace these bushings because I don't know if they've ever been replaced. Generally, I won't replace them unless they're cracked or something like this, but for the sake of, doing a thorough job, let's just do the whole thing.
Okay, so that's what you suggest.
Yeah, definitely. No, if you're trying to fight that problem, get everything new. Try to eliminate that play. The end of stroke switch sounds like it's doing its job. Arcing is normal.
And that all comes, can they get just that separate item, or should they go for the whole flipper rebuild kit package?
If it's your game and you've never rebuilt the flippers, buy the whole thing. It's just, it's like buying a new used car. You do an oil change and kind of get it to a point where you know the condition of all the wear items, right? I always recommend it.
Nice.
So here we have, switch back to that main camera. Let's get a big view. We've got these nuts here that are holding the end of stroke switch, the coil stop to the flipper base plate.
Okay.
They strip out. It's really common. One thing you can do with these plates, they're identical left and right. Here's a brand new one that's totally naked. You see, it's a mirror image, right? You've got two holes here.
Right.
For your flipper bushings. Okay. One thing, it's an old operator trick. If you have a right side that's screwed up, you can take your left side flipper, right, and thread all of the holes on the other side to swap sides. If you don't want to do that, these are available new. But if you're really in a pinch, you can absolutely do that. I always thought that was really brilliant. It's a neat design. So, in lieu of doing that, because it would take a lot of time, I went to my personal stash and found another one, another flipper base plate. And I went ahead and rethreaded these holes. In the mid-'80s, Bally realized that a number 8 coil stop screw was insufficient, and they would break a lot more often on earlier games. So I went ahead and tapped these to 1032. Which is what the size this game would use. They're a lot sturdier. If you were going to do that and you had to take these out, I'd recommend upgrading them to a thicker screw.
Nice.
So,
okay.
Now we can see what we have here. See what size nut this, or bolt, nut this is.
MLZpinhead is going for a flipper rebuild kit, right? Better safe than sorry. And this looks like a pretty fun and simple thing to do, as long as I don't have to worry about soldering, right? If
you're replacing the end of stroke switch or you're replacing the coil, you'll need to solder. But we're going to have to do a video of like just some kind of basic soldering stuff and get people unafraid to bust out their soldering iron. I got one off. So the reason that we're swapping the base plate and you're not saying, like, why don't we just put it back together this way? It's like, well, we could, but if you ever needed to change out the coil or the shaft or the coil stop again, and if it was in this situation, you'd have to remove this thing all the way every time to access these nuts. And I don't want to have to do that. So.
And you are swapping out your base plate because it was
because
damaged.
It's bad. You could try coming in here and re-tapping these to 1032, but it will likely not have enough meat to hold on to, and you'll just have it, breaking often.
I'm heating my iron up in the back. I know, I gotta go to soldering school.
We can see I have a new 1032 screw here.
All right.
I can try to thread it in this side.
And it's just not working too well.
It's just all eaten up.
Got it. So just replace the plate. Will be like butter. You're good to go.
Yep, well, you could remove the plate and re-tap the other side and mark it, hey, only use it for a left side, and then you have a decent spare. But now that we've got that out of the way, we can pull out the inline plunger. And we will also remove the end of stroke switch. A Phillips head, or a flathead screwdriver to get that thing loose. Then we can get this plate out of the way.
Very cool. And another reminder, everyone saw it, but the game is turned off. And if you're doing something like this, please make sure the game is turned off.
Yeah, don't zap yourself.
Oof. That'd be good.
Okay.
Electric Bat Arcade, hey, y'all, ask, aren't these the same flipper assemblies that are in Spectrum?
Yes, it absolutely is.
So if you have a Spectrum, listen carefully if you need to do this flipper rebuild kit. I'm listening too for my hard body. We're all like, Sparks Pinball Museum, they're about to do their Bally-Midway Party Animal flipper rebuild.
That's an awesome game. I love Party Animal.
Flipper rebuild party, all of us.
Greg Ferris did the art on Party Animal, and he did it on this game too.
He did.
So here we go.
And
Here's the new base plate. New old base plate. They are assembled, exactly the same. So, if you were holding them with the flipper bushing facing down, if it's on the left side, it's a right side flipper. Makes a lot of sense. Get this thing out of the way. We're going to yank off the old flipper bushing. That is using a 832 screw that has a 1/4 inch head. We'll use our handy dandy nut driver to bust that loose. The other thing we need to keep in mind on these linear flippers is the most important thing, other than that nylon circle that is part of the crank, is the Nyliner. And I will show you the Nyliner in just a second. I'll show you how to get them out too. The Nyliner is a small bushing that holds, that allows the plunger to float freely in the assembly. Let me grab the old plunger again.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah, Clark Fraley, we're still kind of having our little side convo about solder because I'm like so worried about it. I will not be touching PCB boards anytime soon.
Oh, it's fun. It's easier than you think. It just takes a little practice. So here's the plunger. It is, again, it's straight, it's in line, and one side is smaller than the other. The larger side is what goes into the coil. The smaller side flips into the end bit here.
Okay.
And that little circle, there's a nylon circle in here that keeps this centered so it's not metal on metal contact. That's called the Nyliner. With a lot of play, those things can wear through or become paper thin, and that will be bad. You will have bad flipper action, and you don't want that. Very important to replace these when you are taking these things apart. I'm going to grab my screwdriver, and I'm going to compress it and pop it out. I'll show you what it looks like. Compare it to the new one. That is the Nyliner. It is a small nylon bushing. I don't remember what size this one is. There are a lot of pinball assemblies that use a Nyliner. This is a very common thing on these. It's required on these Bally flipper assemblies. I think it's a 5/16. It looks about that. I think there's like a 3/8 inch one for other things, but your flipper rebuild kit for this era of flipper will have these. If you notice, though, the way you will insert this is it has a split. You can pull it apart a little bit. It's hard to get that on camera.
Okay, so the split's not, it's broken. It's supposed to come
It's supposed to be broken.
Okay.
Since it has a, see how it's kind of got a flange on either side? It might be hard to come through. It's kind of like an L shape off the bottom and L shape off the top, but one side's smaller.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to compress it to get it in the hole. I will grab the new one. I like to install these things with the larger side, the larger flange facing the coil. So what we'll do is we'll get the small end. This is going to be awkward trying to do this on camera, but you'll kind of just want to compress it so they overlap. Don't drop it. You lose 10 points every time you drop something.
We're like minus 100 points today.
Oh yeah. No, I'm minus like 10 billion points in my entire life. I failed. We compress it so they kind of overlap each other a little bit, and then you can kind of stick one side in.
I wish
we had a, maybe next time we do this, we'll have a camera on the bench, and then we could do bench work. I'm going to get this in. It's going to do a little bit of Hollywood magic. It's kind of two-handed thing.
I'm going to go into our wide. Oh, we can kind of watch you. See, your wide cam, yeah, look at us over here. The wide.
Dead? Oh.
Yeah, hi.
We've got tons of cameras. We'll switch it back now because I'm done. Okay. I've got it in. Like the motion is kind of compressing it so it's not fully round, and then to work its way in. You can see versus the shiny, I hope, around here, that the fat side of the flange sits on one side, and this side's flange is much skinnier. So now we will have smooth action when our new plunger slides through that hole. The next step is going to be installing the new flipper bushing. I'm going to reuse the hardware. These black oxide finished 832 thread cutting screws that Bally used are very, very, very high quality. We will reuse these guys.
Yeah, so we got a comment from MLZpinhead again saying, I know you're a stock guy, but a bunch of people suggest going backwards and retrofitting games with the inline shaft plunger with the older flipper mechs.
I don't agree.
Someone did on his Flash Gordon. Is that good? Bad? Kyle doesn't agree.
Well, it's fine, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You're still getting a flipper, but
the inliners. Nyliners?
The inline flippers just have a bad reputation. It's not ideal. Like, you know, the best flipper in the industry, in my opinion, you know, is the modern Stern / WPC style flipper. They are great. I like these. Maybe it's just because I find them fascinating and that's why I think they're awesome. I wouldn't waste the time retrofitting something. If you feel passionate about it, it's your pinball machine. Do what you want.
Fair enough.
Okay, so now we've got that back together. Most of the rest of the work we can do will be easy enough to do up here. We will mount this again, and I'm going to use the fatter of the screws. Need to make sure I grab the fat screw. And we will attach that again using the in the center spot. That's where the larger screw was when we disassembled it. And that will allow the flipper base to hang there while I install the rest of the screws. A lot of things you'll see about these flippers might come from a time when you could not get parts as easily for these games. You know, the parts for the linear flippers are a bit more expensive. But a lot of the hatred may have come from the early 2000s, early 90s, when these things were just not as easy to get parts for, where the older stuff was pretty commonplace. I find these to be fine. I've operated plenty of games with these old linear flippers, and I've never had a problem if you set them up right. Sometimes players don't like them because they feel clunky and slow. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's where the bit of my purist comes out. The designers designed them with these things. They're set up for this. I'm just going to leave it that way. They know more than I do.
Is it that competitive tournament players like to have the other type of flippers? Chat room.
Well,
what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, they like WPC flippers. You know, these old 48-volt, you know, clunky old Ballys and stuff, they don't have, you know, the flippers feel night and day different. In there.
Nice.
You want to make sure that these are nice and tight. I cannot stress enough, especially with these, you know, roller games is old and your theater of magic is old, but this game is old. You want to make sure you tighten everything. When you're under here and you're exploring, you go and sample some screws, right? Take your 1/4-inch nut driver and see how, you know, loose a lot of these screws are. You'll be surprised. You might be able to get half, 3/4 of a turn on a lot of these things. It'll save you a lot of headaches down the line.
Sound advice.
So another thing, this coil is the incorrect coil for this game. It's off by like 1 wire gauge and like a couple windings. When I looked at this is a
oh no.
It's a 25-500, which would be the power winding, the low resistance, high strength, and the hold winding is a 34-4500. So the way you decipher that is coil over here. Yeah, I have another one we could bring closer to the camera. The print's too small. Never mind. This coil here, the 25 in this number refers to the wire gauge. That is the diameter of the wire. 500 refers to how many turns of that 25 gauge wire is wrapped around this bobbin. The same refers to this. So you've got 34 gauge wire, which is thinner. For some reason, the higher the number, the thinner the wire, some wire gauge standard. And then that has a 4,500 turns around this bobbin. So, the stock flipper is a 24 gauge 500 winding and a 36 gauge 4,500 winding. It will be a little bit weaker. You will probably not notice the difference. Coil substitution is not 100% recommended unless you can run the numbers or kind of know, what you're doing. But in this case, this is acceptable. We're going to reuse this coil for now. But before we put that coil in, we are going to replace the coil sleeve.
Change the coil sleeve. See,
yes.
I know that one. That is a dirty. Let's look at dirty that.
Oh yeah, it's disgusting. They're really grody.
So, can I
see, my hands are quite grody
clean
too.
it and put it back in, or I'm just going to change it?
Oh, we're going to change it. They're cheap enough. It's not worth spending your time cleaning a coil sleeve, unless you're really kind of just trying to test or you need, you're in a pinch. One thing, like I mentioned last week, is you always want to try to get the coil with the diode side facing away from the coil stop.
Yeah.
And it looks like we have enough wire to do that. If I were to, maybe not. Let's see. No, it looks like it'll work. The end of stroke switch, we might want to redress that a little bit once we unsolder them, but that might work. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, let's do it. Bye, MLZpinhead. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
You
do want to
later in our archives. The best place to check the archives is either on our YouTube or Facebook pages.
It's in a home environment, having the diode facing the coil stop side is okay, but it's just kind of a best practice that I always try to do when I take these things apart. We will insert. I didn't lose points for that one.
You got to get it in the hole, Kyle.
I know. We'll insert the new coil sleeve. It's a little long, but it will be okay in this assembly. And we will need to get a new...
Wait, it doesn't matter if it's sticking out like that?
Not in this assembly. Unfortunately, when we went to go get these parts, we were out of stock on the correct size coil sleeve. So I had to kind of custom make one. And in this assembly, it is okay to have one that is a little long. with an assembly
yeah,
that would have like a plunger that would be bottoming out here, that would be bad. You would crack the coil sleeve and it would cause problems. So we'll reassemble it and see what we get. If we do not have, if it's not ideal, I'll have to go and hunt for one because I'm sure I have one in my stash somewhere.
Could you cut that sleeve? Like,
yes.
Remember when you cut the rubber on the post? The
yep.
fit on the post? Can you cut the
sleeve? That is a pro tip. If you have, if you need a coil sleeve but you don't have the right size, you can shorten them. There's nothing saying you cannot do that. Generally, you want, I mean, if I would have done this better, this coil sleeve here, let me zoom in and you could see kind of, we've got half a finger width sticking out past the coil retainer. You really want that to be maybe half of this width. You want it to be maybe an eighth of an inch instead of a quarter of an inch. We'll see what we get. But as a stopgap, for example, let's reassemble it this way.
Okay.
Right there. Okay. You do want to get this in before, I guess, actually, you could stick it in from behind. And drop it right in.
Cool.
Now we will want to reinsert the coil stop, and I will get my 1032 screws. And I will stick this in the top. Let's see, another common problem with this assembly in particular is residual magnetism. If you have one of these games and you notice that your flipper sticks in the up position, but you hit the other flipper and it falls down, you likely have a magnetized plunger and coil stop. It's not something that affects many flipper systems, but for some reason, in high play locations, you'll notice that this assembly in particular will do that. So, again, I guess pro tip, if you have sticking linear flippers, check and see if those things are magnetized.
Wait, how do we check to see if they're magnetized?
Put it up to a pinball and drag really slow, and if the pinball follows it, they're magnetized. But the common symptom you'll see is you'll have one flipper stuck, and if you hit this flipper, it'll fall. Just a little jar from the vibration of this flipper hitting will cause it to break its magnetic hold.
Dark Falls 29 on Twitch says brass coil stops would prevent that.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, cool.
And as you notice, the original coil stops are brass.
Look at that. Wait, why didn't you put the brass one on? Oh, because we'd have to resolder.
Well, these coil stops do have a brass, the reproduction coil stops have brass insulators between the core of the stop and the actual bracket. But, again, this is also in like a really high play location. I noticed this for the first time at the Pacific Pinball Museum, and those games get romped on, hundreds of thousands of flips a week. When you're reattaching a coil stop, it is a good idea to kind of pinch these things together when you are tightening them. Don't tighten one side down with like insane strength and then, get this one and tighten it down. Try to get them even, kind of like torquing a wheel on a car. You want to evenly get to that maximum torque, and that will help keep this coil. Wait, I forgot something.
Oh, I thought you got like electrocuted. I was like, the game's off!
No. This is another thing that will kind of prevent a lot of what I just said being like super, super important, but it is a best practice. From the factory, these games came with a wave washer. They don't sit exactly flat. I can't get that to come through very well. Got a little kink to it.
Yeah.
But this guy, you can insert it on either side of the coil. There's no correct way to do it. This guy will apply a little bit of back pressure. So the coil will stay tight all the time.
Nice. Those
do come with your flipper rebuild kits too. If your game didn't have them when you disassemble the flipper, it's not that big of a deal. But I like to put things back together the way the engineers put them. So.
Nice. So this is a pretty fast and basic installation. We're almost done, right?
It is, and this is also like, we had to do almost the most complicated repair as well, which is like replacing the base, etc. I
Right,
did cheat and I tapped these off camera this morning with my 1032 tap, but
is that something I would need to do if I was replacing the plate?
no, only if you needed to switch sides. I tapped them out so I could use the number 10 screws instead of the number 8 screws, just so I can make sure all the hardware is uniform throughout the game. So now that sucker's on there. Looks good.
Oh,
we can
MGM
now.
Studio said it's called a shading ring, installed between the bracket and steel coil stop to prevent the core from becoming magnetized.
Huh. I wasn't aware that was supposed to be to keep it from getting magnetized. I always assumed it was there just to keep the play out of the coil. Look at that. I learned something new. What was it called? A shaving ring?
A shading, like shade.
Huh.
That's how I do shade.
Interesting. Well,
shading ring?
In that case, you're going to watch me do this one more time. I'm going to put it back on the other side. I do see that all the rest of them are between the retainer and the coil, but you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. And if this game this game will never go on location because it's actually my wife's, but...
So you're moving it?
What?
You're going to move that ring?
Yeah. You just said that the fella said it was supposed to go between the coil and the coil stop.
Installed between the bracket and the steel core. We wrote steel core stop, but I think they mean steel.
Oh, yes. Okay. No. Hey, thanks for that information. Well, now you watch. You get to watch me do a fourth time, and I'm putting this back where I usually put it. Okay, so that should reduce the amount of magnetism. This is just to keep the coil under tension.
The steel core stop.
Steel core stop.
To prevent core from
becoming magnetized. Yep. All right. So now we're going to get this back in there, and we're really going to test the quality of my tap job on these bases because they have been torqued and untorqued 4 times in the past 10 minutes.
And what happens if the quality is not good? What should we expect?
I will not be able to torque them down sufficiently, and I will have to replace the base. So again, we'll pinch down, get them evenly snug, keep it pinched, and torque. And torque. Get those things really tight. Now we've got a new crank. I got the incorrect side. Here's the correct side crank. And what we can do is, generally I'll like to attach the screw or the spring before I start fiddling with it.
Okay.
We'll loop one end of the spring through the hook.
Oh, a drop of blue thread lock on coil stop screws is a good idea?
It can be. I don't like it. I don't want to have to grip precarious threads like these things are. But that will absolutely keep your coil stops in place. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back on the other side of the playfield, install the flipper bat.
Okay. And I was like,
then what we need to do, we need to get the flipper bat to go through the new crank. And then we also need to rotate and get the shaft into position, just like that.
Right.
Now,
it was already there.
We've got it almost all the way assembled.
It looks pretty.
Yeah, it's a lot shinier and a lot less black dirt.
It all rubbed off on your hands. But these are the new ones, right?
These are brand new. So I'm gonna bring these set screws in a teeny bit. We're gonna just get them snug to the point where the flipper bat will kind of stay in position. So we can do a little bit of finagling. I'm gonna rotate the flipper to where it should go. We'll look at this again before we finish up. and you want to make sure we adjust for end play. I have got a ton of end play there.
Yeah, my goodness.
That's way too much.
Right?
So we're going to push this down, get the flipper to go through. I forgot my my feeler gauge at home, but this would be the point where last week where we put the
little flipper
free play gauge in between the flipper crank and the bushing to check for free play. I can eye it and I can kind of feel we've got enough free play there where it really won't be too much of an issue. So at this point, I'm going to set my initial torque, get this thing so it won't rotate. This side.
Twist it around.
And that'll be good enough for now. We're going to want to adjust it more once we're like ready to play the game. We'll want to make sure the bat is in line with the lane guide so we don't get the ball hop once it gets to the flipper. But for all intents and purposes, we've got a fully assembled flipper mech again.
Wow.
But we definitely will want to replace these end of stroke switches.
Oh, what's wrong with the end of stroke switches?
Oh, they're gross.
Gross. And that comes with the flipper rebuild kit as well. So you should be prepared to do all of them, right?
Yeah, you might as well. If you're taking it apart, and again, if you're doing this, you should know how to solder, so you can replace these. Not sure if we will be doing that today, how close we're running for time, or maybe if we should...
Time is irrelevant today.
Yeah, that's right. We started like an hour late. It might be better to do the soldering next time. Maybe that will be something we can do where we can set up the cameras a little bit better.
Need a soldering class.
Well, we'd have a little basic introductory to soldering. The way it is right now, like I'd have to kind of be like, even being as tall as I am, like on my tiptoes and up like this, and my arms would be in front of the camera.
And
maybe we'll save a little bit of soldering for next time. I don't know. What do you think?
I would love to do that.
Okay, but I want to show off this because we do get a lot of calls about these switches. The way Bally...
Can you bring it up a little?
Yeah. The way Bally powered these upper flippers was through a secondary switch. So what would happen is the flipper crank... Let me see if I could get this in a better spot. The flipper crank will come here and open up the end of stroke switch, switching to the high resistance, full resistance of the coil, and also close that upper switch, which supplies ground to the upper flipper coil, which will activate it. Some games, Williams was really fond of using 2 flipper switches inside the cabinet. Bally used 2 end of stroke switches. So these are 2 separate pieces for upper flipper games like Bobby Orr Power Plays and this game, anything else with an upper flipper, 8-Ball Deluxe. You'll need to get this, stack of switches, and they're 2 separate parts.
How do you connect them?
Connect them.
We connect them. How do you stack them together like that? Like they're just dangling there perfectly.
Yeah, well, so you've got a normally closed switch, which is your end of stroke switch. This needs to be closed to use the power winding of the coil. And then you will stack the normally open switch on top. And when they, actuate, one opens and the other one closes. So I will grab my hardware here. We will get these in place.
Yeah, it would not be good to put them upside down or one stacked on the other side. There's definitely one way to stack them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think since this game... Hold on one sec.
See, if we get the C920 Logitech, we could have just a camera right there where all your tools are, too.
Yeah, we can have a crazy amount of cameras. Seems like this flipper stack that I have here, here you go. This is where you need to use a little bit of creative thinking. This flipper stack, the reproduction flipper stack, is a bit thicker.
We don't see where you're holding it.
1 second. I'm getting it in position.
Oh, okay, sorry. We were excited.
So a switch stack consists of fiber pieces, insulators, switch blades. This switch stack, as it sits now, is a little too thick to use the screws that came out of the game. We look at the stack that was in the game, which may or may not be stock, it is considerably shorter.
Yeah.
So one thing we can do is we can see if this switch stack will work okay if I remove this lower fiber link, or we could go and get the correct size screw. One way we can test that.
Can I just glue them together?
Sure. Can't guarantee it'll last very long.
What about duct tape?
Flex seal or whatever that meme is. Oh, hey, look at that. Kyle put this on totally backwards. I used the wrong side crank, and I didn't notice until right now. See? Here we go. So we're going to fix that.
Where's the chat room?
Everyone roast me.
No one said anything. Wait, so how can you tell which one you're using?
So here you go. I should have looked at the other flipper. I had this all laid out on my table, all like, oh, these are the right side, these are the left side. But I wasn't paying attention. This is the end of stroke actuator right here. If this flipper reaches its end of stroke, nothing's going to open that switch. So these things do have sides, just like the Williams ones would. So now I get to put my tail between my legs and fix my screw up that I just put on the internet, but that's fine. Oh, that's the wrong size Allen wrench.
One of those days.
It's one of those days. Cut me a little bit of slack. Get it fully in there. Turn. Come on, someone has to be roasting me. I want to hear it.
He's obviously a leftist. That's the word you got.
No comment. Is that Marco Ramirez?
No, MGM Studio.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know who that is, but I accept the insult or compliment, whatever it's going to be.
Project Pinball said no slack for you.
I shouldn't. I should not. This is like a total roasting opportunity. I need the. I taught people incorrectly. All right. That looks better because now when this thing moves, it will hit the switches that aren't there. So
I would have caught that too, but I don't know yet. But next time I will definitely know. That makes more sense. Looks better.
Yeah, it looks right now, finally. So again, I'm going to kind of come here, get these a little bit tight so they'll hug the flipper bat and it won't just go swinging all over the place.
Nice.
I'll come back here, kind of line it up to where it needs to go.
That's great.
Check for free play. I really don't have any, so I'm going to try to pull the bat up through the top. Not enough still. Let's keep pulling. What I'm doing is holding the crank and rotating and twisting the flipper to try to pull it up out of the crank a teeny bit. I've got it a little too tight to use that technique, so I'm going to loosen it again. Then I can set my free play a little bit better. Now I can tighten it again. A little too much. I might be able to split the difference. This is where that feeler gauge comes in handy because it takes all of the guesswork out of this.
Nice.
That's pretty good. I'll reset the flipper bat. And we will retighten it. All right. And we'll show, I'll flip the playfield down once we have this in, and we can show that roll pin, just like we were looking at on roller games last time,
Right.
where the factory would use to line the flippers up a little bit. When I'm about to finish and I have the flipper like totally in the right spot, this really doesn't provide sufficient torque. This Allen key, you really, really do want to use something with a little more oomph to it, like a key handle wrench or something like that.
Okay.
These need to be tight. If these aren't tight, the flipper bat will rotate and you'll get a drifting flipper that'll either come up or down, and that's no fun.
I've seen that on location before.
Yeah. But yeah.
Now I know how to fix it.
what we'll probably do, and again, because this is something you will have to deal with when you're working on a game that is old and cobbled together, you're going to need to, you will encounter things like this that will require you either going and getting more parts or needing to modify something. In this case, since these screws are not long enough to go through the entire stack, I will get the correct ones. I'm going to show you what I have here with these screws that are just a teeny bit too short. It's definitely worth it to have the right parts instead of rushing something if there's no hurry, right? I have this fully assembled.
Come down a little. Oh, there you go.
You can't even see this, this one's like way short and this one's like not even present. So we will be getting longer screws. These screws I know off the top of my head are 440. I think it's a number 4 screw with 40 threads per inch. So we'll get some longer ones. But that is the joy of repairing old pinball fixes. It's, once you've worked on a bunch of old clunkers enough, it's fun to see the fixes that people would, get these games going with. Guy goes to the bar, gets a service call because the flippers don't work anymore at, 9 o'clock on a Friday night. And, well, he fixed it with a paper clip and, whatever the dude had in his toolbox. And it's funny to see how many of those, creative fixes are still working nowadays. So yeah.
Hacks, pinball hacks. So you're not going to do this because you don't have the long enough screw?
I want to make sure we have the right screws. I'd rather assemble it once correctly instead of, getting it to work and then trying to reassemble. If we do get this in place now, though, just look on the camera.
Yeah.
You can kind of see the end of stroke switches.
Yeah.
Sort of. When this is in place now, though, we can see, because of this fat fiber stack on the bottom, actually, it does kind of space it away a little too far for this to even hit the actuator.
Yeah.
Let me remove it. Let's see what we can get. What I'm going to use is a small flathead screwdriver. I'm going to use my trusty pre-bent screwdriver. I like it. It's handy. What I can do is I can try to shove the screwdriver in between the fiber pieces, try to pop them apart.
Per Monsen says, use the old stack and just replace the blades.
I can't. The old stack for the end of stroke switch is one of these like all-in-one molded together pieces. You see these? I don't know who made these. I should ask the big boss. Mark might know. These might have been like a Wicco replacement or something like that back in the day. Maybe Bally used these. I'm not sure. But these ones cannot be separated.
MGM Studio said Wicco.
That's exactly what I would do if that was, an option. But unfortunately, I'm stuck with this method. Now, once I've removed that bottom stack, I do have the insulators that run through the stack sticking out the bottom. I'm going to try and using the side rail of the game here to try to push them through to the top. Another method might be trying to use some flush cutters to cut them off. I'm going to try now. That's working okay. It's soft plastic, so what I can do is get in here and try to nip away. Try to get it as flat as possible, and this might be the ticket. You don't have flush cutters, you need flush cutters. These are super, super, super important.
And you're just snipping it off?
Yep, I'm snipping off this part that's overshooting this bottom of the fiberboard.
Oh, wow.
This is going to remove a couple millimeters of space and make it a little bit closer to factory thickness. So now I can take this, apparently, Wicco end of stroke switch and match it up, and it's a little bit thicker, but it will do. The thing is, if I use that fat one, even if I had the right length screws, you'd really have to bend this end of stroke switch down and towards the actuator, and that's not ideal. You want these switches to stay as true to their, straight and flat orientation as possible for reliable action. So if I hold this in place now, we do get some contact, and we do have braking. So that's good. I'll see if we can use the screws we have now, actually. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, because you did make it a bit shorter.
Really quick, I'm going to...
So is that something we would all have to do if, like, for example, I'd be working on my Bally-Midway flipper rebuild on hard body. Do I have to expect to pull that extra piece off of my...
Maybe not. Again, this game isn't using stock components, and a lot of times when these components are remade, they are made after the stock unit from the factory. So someone has modified this game at some point to use the part that they had. So, that's kind of why we have to do a lot of pinball archaeology here at Marco to figure out what is correct, how it should be. Just because, this game is how old?
1986, 34 years old.
Yeah, it's old. And, a lot of things are not stock anymore. It has been taken apart, put back together again many times. I'll get this switch. It would help if I had a screwdriver to put this in.
It's going to fit. It's going to fit.
It fits.
Yay.
It'll be okay. Another thing that I need to, we will do next week when we solder the end of stroke switch on is we will install an insulator here. We remember talking about last week converting the Williams flippers away from using their compression springs and switching them into an expansion spring, and I talked about high voltage being introduced to the flipper crank, pawl, and assembly because of the lack of insulation here. We will get some fat heat shrink tubing, slip it over this actuator, and shrink it around there. So the high voltage remains only on these switches and cannot be transferred to the plates. When you are installing these end-of-stroke switches again, twisting and tightening the screws will cause them to rotate. Oh, where's my hand? Will rotate a little bit. We want to make sure that we hold them to kind of be flush with the side of the bracket that they mount on. So when I'm tightening these things, I will try to hold them as steady as possible.
That makes sense.
Screwdriver is not the ideal length for this job, but it's working. Again, we'll get them to where they are nice and snug, then start to tighten. Then we have our, again, the goal is to keep these switches to be parallel with the flipper base and the playfield. We don't need things twisting around when they're not supposed to be. There we go.
Yay.
And that is actually crazy because they are pretty much adjusted perfectly right off the get-go. That doesn't happen often. Let's get real close now because I can kind of do the rest of this one-handed, and I want to make sure we can, or y'all can see. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. Forgive me. I don't know how to use cameras.
I'm switching over until you find your shot. Where are you at?
So what we've got here.
You good?
Remember,
Okay.
end of stroke switch, normally closed.
Okay.
Upper flipper switch, normally open.
Okay.
When we close or actuate the flipper,
it reverses.
We've got a closed upper flipper switch and a end of stroke switch that is open about the right length. This does need to come in. So what I'll do is sometimes you could just do it with your thumb, push it in just a teeny bit. Still open. It's a little close for comfort. We want to adjust these things to have a little wipe. And once we have a camera set up where I don't have to hold it with one hand, I can show you how to adjust these end of stroke switches to have a little bit of wipe in them. But that's pretty good. Now we just need to solder all these wires on. And we can do that next week.
Okay. So that's it. And so we would repeat that process for the other two flippers as well, right?
Yep. They'll be mostly similar. Again, Again, though, when you're working on these old games, you're going to find things that might throw you for a loop. You know, if I would have just ordered the flipper rebuild kit, I wouldn't have known that this thing was missing a screw. You will need to find the correct screw to replace this flipper bushing, right? Sometimes you have to do slight modifications if your game isn't using 100% factory equipment. So, you know, it's good to have hardware on hand and be patient. You know, sometimes you can't sit down and do these projects all in one sitting unless you have, you know, an entire pinball warehouse at your disposal.
Pictures. And for our feed, if you want to come back and look, we do archive these on YouTube and on Facebook. That's for Chris the Pintern, who was asking. Yes, they are all archived. Thanks, Mitchell readers. We've had a struggle today, but, you know, we got a flipper rebuilt almost.
Yeah, well, one.
And,
but yeah,
Howard,
no, thanks for
you got the double stack switch part.
Struggling with us. Really quick before we 100% go.
A different camera.
Don't you want to see Marco?
Okay, you're going in?
Yeah, we're going to go in and just see, like, I was mentioning with those dowels.
You are very zoomed in. Oh, okay, I see. The little holes right there?
Yep, those are the alignment dowels. Again, from the factory, these roll pins would be sticking up. The factory worker would use them to figure out the alignment of the flipper, tighten it down, pound it flat. The Williams ones generally are closer to the flipper bat. The Bally ones are a little further away. But what I'll try to do is get this wider section at the bottom of the flipper to line up with the roll pin right there. So this one looks to be adjusted a little bit low. The goal again.
Can you stick something in there and then use it like how? Like
a lot of people will use a toothpick.
Oh, cool. Just don't hammer the toothpick in. Right?
Nah, you don't want to do that. So, got a lot of parts left over, a lot of tools sitting about. I have a lot of work ahead of me.
Mitchell Reader says, thanks for sticking with it. Every episode is getting better and better.
Thank you.
We're trying so hard.
Thank
you for your extreme patience with us.
And you know, again, recommendations. If you guys want to see something in specific, I have a lot of games set up that we can use to do some specific testing. Again, everyone just needs to keep saying Baywatch because I really need to get to that. Baywatch. But yeah, if there's anything you want to see, you know, we'll definitely go over doing flippers on all these games eventually. The problem is it's like Xenon uses the same flippers, Viking uses the same flippers.
Ooh, Jack in the Box? Jackbox? Oh.
We could do Jack in the Box eventually. That game needs a little love.
Jack in the Box.
That thing earned a lot of money on location, so it's ready for some love. But anyways,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, are you ready for some other pinball news?
Always.
It's not really news, but we do have an exciting... It's the beginning of the month, which means May is over. Good thinking, Imoto.
You don't say.
And that means I get to do my raffle for my Instagram pinball quiz. Now, if you don't follow us on Instagram, please do. Hold on, Kyle's moving the camera around. It's making me nauseous. There we go. Come Vanna White here, Lady Luck. So the pinball quiz is little close-ups of playfields or the back glass or, you know, side cabinet art. I post it daily, mostly on the Instagram stories. If you guess it right, I put your name into a drawing, and at the end of the month or the beginning of the following month, we will do a random drawing and send you like our new Marco Wizard shirt and a keychain or coffee mug, you know, whatever we're feeling like packing that day. So it's just exciting, you know, not super high stakes, but just a lot of fun.
You kidding? Coffee mugs and t-shirts is like, that's stakes, man.
It's really exciting. So I'm gonna run my pinball quiz now. I have a random name generator. You can't see. You're just gonna have to trust me. And
you think I'm gonna win again?
First, shout out to Kyle, who has gotten a lot of them correct. But we have one Instagrammer, what is there, like Lil Loris. He's actually from Italy, and I believe he's got every single one correct. So
Wow.
that's pretty amazing.
Well, according to you, I've gotten all of them wrong.
No, and of course, see, that's why it's important to play every day, because I didn't stage this, but literally, Lil Loris won. So congratulations. We will get you a shirt all the way to Italy. You want to take a trip to Italy, Kyle, and you can hand deliver it?
Yeah, I'm totally down for that. Absolutely.
That's awesome. What are the odds? I swear it wasn't rigged. Literally, his name was in there almost 30 times. So
Wow.
his odds were good of winning, and
Good work.
sure enough, the odds were in his favor. The other piece of news we did a mini announcement last time. Let me show my little new promo. We have an episode coming soon. We're gonna get our own Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Pro and unbox it on PinTech Live. And Kyle, you're gonna show us how to unbox a new Stern pinball machine and all the different things you should look at and be aware of, like cleaning your balls. And
That's important.
It's always important to clean your balls.
There's a few things that you can do to enhance your pinball setup process. It's super easy. I'm excited to show you how easy it is to do and how I've learned to do it by myself. Right. I kind of have an unfair advantage because I do have a lot of leverage, but I'll make sure we use some safe tools to show you all how you could do it with things that are not special, things you have in your house.
Look at that baby turtle. And did you know, Kyle, that not only do we get to unbox a new Turtles machine, but we also get to donate it to Project Pinball's raffle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that
you
is
know
awesome.
all about these raffles, right? So it's $50 donation, goes straight to Project Pinball, and they'll do a raffle once that is all filled up. I believe it's only 200 entries, and you could potentially win the Turtles pinball machine that Kyle touched a lot for only $50.
I don't know. That might decrease the value, man.
Baby turtle.
That's awesome. Project Pinball is an awesome charity.
Yay,
and it's
Pinball. And
awesome to support them.
They're getting some other swag too that we'll be giving away on the shows leading up to it. Some other fun raffle, a translite, maybe some shirts or something. And we're just going to have fun with it, because pinball is awesome.
Yeah. So cool. That's awesome. I'm really looking forward to that.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking with us for these 2 hours as we slowly grow our PinTech Live show and try to bring you some, decent content of pinball repair. I know this weekend I'm going to work on my flipper rebuilds for hard body, and I hope you guys are working on yours as well.
Yeah, and just remember, don't put your flipper cranks on backwards and always be tightening. It's as easy as that.
It's as easy as ABC, and in this case, ABT. Next week, Kyle, what are we doing?
We'll do a little bit of basic soldering. I'd like to sit down and we can do like multiple kinds of soldering at some point, but let's get those end of stroke switches installed, soldered on, and maybe we'll explore something else on the game. We could take a look at the unique slingshot mechanisms. We can disassemble the drop targets possibly because I'm getting some new ones. Yeah, we'll see. We'll come up with something clever. And if you have any suggestions or any requests, please let us know.
Yeah, shoot us an email, put it in the chat, or email us at marcotv@marcopinball.com. And until next time, see you guys. Bye.
Bye.